Hello and welcome to today's broadcast. I'm Davina, I'm your host. The topic to start with for today is National Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it's a sad day in terms of just remembering the sheer volume of human beings who had their lives brutally stolen from them, as well as remembering the survivors who had to contend with the knowledge that they were targeted from people who willingly chose to exploit racism and the worst types of tribalism in order to create an environment where state-sanctioned violence was first encouraged and then became state-compelled violence against Jewish people, against any designated enemies of Nazis, against homosexual people, against the whistleblowers who spoke up against the atrocities, and more on that vein, just anybody who was perceived to be antithetical to the goals of the Nazi Party. Now, my other topic for the day is that racism promotes gullibility and racism promotes violence. And that connects to another important news story of the day, the death at the hands of 5 police officers of Tyrone Nichols. And anti-blackness, anti-black racism is something that can become systematic, can carry its own inertia and its own gravity. So if you want to counter the arguments of racist people who say, well, that proves it wasn't racism if it was black police officers attacking a black man, and you choose to stand up to those neighbors, acquaintances, colleagues, friends who've advanced such arguments, please look at them and remind them that the argument is that there is a sustained and systemic level of violence that has become ingrained in the training of police officers and the practices of police officers in the United States. And that training and that group ethics is presumed to broadly contaminate the thinking and the behavior of a lot of police officers. I don't condone calls to defund or abolish the police, because a lot of people prefer there to be an organization and an agency responsible for protecting people and protecting their property from the actions of those who seek to violate not only the law but also the social law, the implicit social understanding that you shouldn't hurt other people or steal from them, or take out your problems on other people. That even if you're an addict, you don't get to advance your supply of drugs by robbing people. Bob is here, hello Bob, and is noting that police officers in the United States only train for a minimum of 10 weeks, whereas in Ireland, police have to train for 2.5 years, and so do police officers in Sweden. That's a very salient point. Thank you, Bob. I would also note that it's been reported that some of the training of police officers in the United States includes prolific use of videos that concentrate the portrayal of criminals as being black people, and that there is often an ethos of them against us, sort of anti-civilian attitude amongst the police force, in no small part because there are additional dangers associated with being an officer of the law in the United States as a result of the unseemly overproliferation of guns, which is a consequence of indulging powerful, wealthy racists in the judicial system and in government in a minoritarian rule kind of way, because the majority of Americans support appropriate gun safety laws as they support laws to prevent car accidents and laws to encourage compliance with obtaining a driver's license and obeying the rules of the road in order to keep each other safe. But laws to keep each other safe in America with regards to guns have been less successful than they needed to be because of the actions of the donor class, the wealthy donor class that prioritizes the profits of gun manufacturers, and the Republican politicians who prioritize the success of those gun proliferation lobbyists and disregard the consequences for ordinary Americans. And people find ways to emotionally insulate themselves from that reality. People find ways to tell themselves lies, to say, oh, well, the gun violence only impacts the people who are impoverished in America. It's just low-class people, and if I'm middle class, I don't have to worry about that. And that kind of artificial insulation from anxiety brings consequences that do impact all of us, including the middle classes and the upper classes, because anybody can be in an environment where there is the latest gun massacre, the latest church shooting, school shooting, theater shooting, shopping mall shooting. And it's pathetic and self-defeating to keep insulating yourself from very real problems that need to be addressed by a consensus of Americans, and more than a consensus. A lot of people need to be vocal in their efforts in order to counteract all of the things that white wealthy people and wealthy people have going for them in the United States. The disproportionate power that is afforded to wealth here because of decisions like the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision that imbued money with some of the protections of the First Amendment. Said money is a form of speech, therefore people should be allowed to give any quantity of money to a political PAC, thus introducing a significant way for democracy to be perverted, for the will of the people to be perverted. So that's my point about that. Oops. Let's have a look. There are some other things I want to bring to people's attention today. One is that Ronna McDaniel has won her fourth term as chair of the RNC, the Republican National Committee. So she's already overseen a lot of Republican losses or Republican failures to live up to expectation, etc. So people are cheering. I mean, who are the other candidates? Mike Lindell, who you may know as the bad pillow person who was photographed outside the White House before January the 6th, carrying pieces of paper that were recommending martial law. He was like drinking a coffee and reading this piece of paper that said, you must assert martial law to Donald Trump. That was part of Mike Lindell's advice, as he was part of the gang of anti-constitutional, anti-democracy weirdos that were trying to find a path for Trump to overturn the results of an American democratic presidential election. So here on Twitter, we see Rick Wilson making a point, and he said, if y'all want to know the other secret why Ronna won, aside from Trump, she is in on the WinRed deal. And those consultants who make many, many, many millions from the skim on WinRed weren't going to put a rando into the RNC. And it's still the largest unreported corruption story in DC. So that circles back to my earlier point, which is racism enhances gullibility. And I'm going to return to the quote that many people are probably familiar with from American President Lyndon B. Johnson. He was raised in the South, and he once said, if you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. That's a powerful quote and probably reflects a lot of people's experience with MAGA supporters. They are literally emptying their own pockets to throw money at Donald Trump to support his story about how he was robbed and how his white grievance story is so similar to so many white people who have been impacted by people giving promotions to Black people or voting for president like Joe Biden, who is a purported ally to American Black people. So they're emptying their own pockets, but they're also causing damage to other people's pockets as well. The level of persistence of white people in America who repeatedly vote against their own obvious interests in order to vote for a Republican Party that sabotages the healthcare system, closes hospitals in rural settings, diverts funds away from public schools in red states in order to create vouchers for parent choice, i.e., draw students away from the public schools so they'll get less funds, and create public-funded, taxpayer-funded resources in private schools where they are not legally compelled in the way that public schools are to accept children of all races and to accept children of all abilities and to have educational programs for students with disabilities. So children in rural schools who don't live near a private school or a charter school are going to be harmed by what's happened in Iowa recently, and then other red states working to champion this as a desirable outcome. School choice, vouchers, distribute taxpayer funds differently instead of having taxpayer-funded, taxpayer children-attended public schools, which have obligations to be equitable, to not discriminate against Black children or children of Hispanic background or any type of children. And let's have some more of these white Christian academies where they can choose who is allowed to go to their school and have those academies be taxpayer funded. So legitimize and fund racist discriminatory practices in schools. Yes. Anyway, I had best go, but I recommend learning that Lyndon B. Johnson quote off by heart. It's taken me a long time, but fundamentally, I know it's something I need to know off by heart because it is so powerful in its expository power. It's explanatory power. I've got to write a script before I do these broadcasts, but at the same time, I hope that my willingness to laugh at myself and my interest in learning new words and honing my abilities to describe what happens here and elsewhere will endear me to viewers. So Lyndon B. Johnson once said, if you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best Black man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he will empty his pockets for you. So you don't even have to give him someone to look down on, at least on the surface. You can just be successful in telling a story that white people are the true victims of the modern era. And you appeal to somebody's grievance narrative. You work yourself into the conversation in a way that's symbiotic to whatever lies Fox News is telling their audience or whatever distortions Fox News is selling to a broad millions of Americans who tune in. We condemn them for their devotion to making themselves gullible, their devotion to selling out the truth and selling out facts just for an ego-reinforcing stream of lies about America, to misrepresent the social justice movements as just being something that burned American cities down, something that's a bigger threat than, say, the January 6th efforts of a few thousand people to try and dismantle American democracy, to attack police officers, injuring 140 of them, spraying Brian Sicknick Officer Brian Sicknick with so much bear spray and pepper spray that he suffered from a stroke within the next 24 hours and died, as well as multiple other 3 police officers from attending that day take their own lives. Such was the psychologically destabilizing power of having Americans attack their own Capitol building and attack the officers defending that building, with accusations that they were traitors and that they were on the wrong side. So that must have been really overwhelming, and we can see the outcome: 3 suicides over the next few days after the Capitol attack from Trump supporters, brought to the point of violence because, as Voltaire said, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And that is also very relevant to the atrocities committed by organizer-in-chief Adolf Hitler and his various dutiful groups and agencies of prison guards and SS officers and the military and all of those who participated, who conducted the mechanics of mass murdering millions of Jewish families, Jewish children, and leaving a portion of survivors who could tell the world about their experience, leaving behind some records so that we could show people this was not a figment of anybody's imagination. This was just the horror that humans are capable of. Not comfortable to look at, but as you grow older, you may learn that the pain of looking at Holocaust evidence is part of the price we need to pay to prevent other such events, and that human nature is very capable of believing lies and getting caught up in a type of false patriotism that denigrates innocent minority groups, that takes crimes committed by 1 or 2 people and says everybody's like this, and we are doing an injustice to the victims of a crime unless we condemn all Mexican migrants or all Jews. That type of purposely picking on individuals in order to denigrate and shame and feed the appetite for violence. It's a weapon used by manipulative con artists and despots and authoritarians over and over again to find those worst parts of human nature and use it as a money maker and an influence maker for themselves, and ultimately bring devastation on anybody connected to their hateful projects and their hateful enterprises. So keep condemning Trump and his followers for their willingness to abase themselves and abase their own thinking abilities in order to preserve Trump's false narrative about being a perpetual victim of diversity and inclusion and immigration. Trump is only ever a victim of his own bad choices and his own despotic tendencies that often provide him with short-term gratification, but long-term take the lives, first of all, of hundreds of thousands of Americans. And I'm looking at the ongoing effects of Trump making a pandemic into a team event where you cheer for one team over the other, making it a divided reality that you pick your loyalty to certain people, and then you choose which people you listen to and you give credence to, and you reject the vaccine or mitigating measures like masks. And then it becomes a contagious behavior that reduces all of our ability to act in concert to reduce the spread and the risks associated with COVID, all initiated by Trump to try and give himself a more potent electoral advantage over Biden. Didn't work, but it was definitely something he consciously attempted to do at the expense of the lives of literally millions of Americans. Oh, Bob is off, and so am I. Thank you so much for tuning in, to anyone who listened and to any replay viewers. Take care and all the best. I'll see you soon.